Money and debt is power, and it should not be left in the hands of 5% of the population who have become an aristocracy. It should not.
And it shouldn't be the banks, it shouldn't be the politicians.
I think it'll have to be the politicians unless we get angels to come and deal with it. But at least with politicians you can say, you're fired. Which we can't do to the board, can we?
Tony, I absolutely agree with that, and the democratic control. Just to add slightly to Joe's point, just to answer it slightly, there is a need for the kinds of banking functions that banks do in which they're creating that. So there is a real, absolute economic, in reality, need to do it, but it doesn't need to be done the way it is now, and if you can find ways of doing it by removing as much risk as possible, then either MMT or some kind of state or some kind of hybrid way, then you can get it as good as it's ever going to be. But it does fulfil a need, so you still need to do some of that.
Yes. There's a lady back there.
Right, sorry, who was the second question? Was it you? Right, sorry, you're the third one, okay.
I just want to put another perspective onto this, because it seemed to me that the main reason that these people started producing their own money in the United States and here was because in the 70s, the economy, the real economy, was slowing down and was in a lot of trouble. And one of the ways they're allowed to print money is exactly the same as they're printing quantitative easing now, is endeavour to get people to think that they're getting richer. And much of this money actually went into inflated house prices.
Yes.
And that made people think they were richer, and made people think that they got more money in their pocket, and it kept the economy going in a rather inflated way.
Yeah.
And has left us with a whole lot of debt, whether it's personal debt or whether it's bank debt.
Yes.
And I think the major problem we've got is to understand that in the Western world we can't keep growing like this.
No.
And I suspect one of the reasons why most of the politicians, there's two reasons why. One is they're scared stiff to say no growth, and they see having money as a way of actually promoting growth. And that's a big, big problem, because nearly everyone in this country wants growth. They're always talking about growth as the answer to all their problems.
Yes.
And the second problem is that they really are scared of what will be the repercussions. I've talked to a number of politicians myself over that time. They were very worried if they let any banks go bankrupt. Those rich people wouldn't just touch their own money, they would touch all that stuff too. And I still think they would. These rich people have got certain power. If you don't do it slowly and carefully, you'll end up, they will take our money with them as well. They won't just take theirs. They will grab everything they can. And you'll see us really going in, as is happening in Greece now. You see, I think what I want to hear from you, David, is a much more subtle way of how you're going to do this. Because I think to say you stop the banks doing that and you pass on the politicians, that's not going to happen. You've got to do it in a much more subtle way. And I think when talking to party people in the Labour Party, there is a great lack of understanding of what they can do slowly but surely to change the system without frightening. Because at the moment, if you change it too suddenly, people would just move their investment out of Britain overnight. You would see it. This is what they're doing in Greece. They just move their money away. And I think you've got to be a little careful of how you try and put forward a very good argument, put forward it in a practical way which politicians can listen to, and not just lovely statements.
No, I agree. Just coming up with a wonderful theory is just coming up with a wonderful theory. It's called Marxism. I loved it. I learned it as a child from my grandfather. I think it's a wonderful theory. It's a theory. Reality is a lot messier. But to take your example of Greece, okay, let's look at Argentina, who has been down the road that Greece is on before. Okay, Argentina recently sequestered $2 billion worth of the assets of the world's second largest oil company, an American company. Okay?
But they're deep economic trouble in Argentina at the moment.
Yes, which is a legacy of the free market mantra which they were shattered with for the last 30 years, not because they sequestered $2 billion worth of Conocos of the American oil company. But the interesting thing is, after that happened, after that ruling came down, where they just said, look, you are going to obey the law. There was a court judgment in Ecuador against them. And the oil company said, we could buy and sell Ecuador. We don't have to pay up. We're not going to pay up. For 20 years they haven't. Argentina said, fine, then we're sequestering your assets. How do you like them apples? And they also nationalised an oil company, YPL I think it's called, which, yeah. And the Spaniards are hopping mad and actually said, we would like to have a discussion about paying us for that which we used to own. I surely cannot be the only one to find a bit of a chuckle to hear a Spaniard complaining about how some of their treasure was stolen from them in South America. What? But the interesting thing is, after they did this, what has big oil done? Like you said, the global economy would just shut them out. No, they've actually, those oil companies, the oil companies that they've sequestered assets have formed a neat line, a very polite line, outside the door of the Argentinians saying, now that you've nationalised that, you're sitting on nearly 250 billion cubic feet or something of natural gas. Could we do some business with you? We have to grow some balls and realise that the assets can be ours. And if they are ours, then the market has nothing. The market doesn't create wealth just by thinking of it using their masters of bachelors. No, they've got to have some assets. There are assets which we can say, look, you're not playing nice. You're disregarding the law. You've got one law for you, one law for us. We're not having it. And amazingly, the sky doesn't fall in. It can be done. Ecuador cancelled billions of dollars worth of their debt. They just used international law to say, this is odious debt, we're not paying. Yeah. All countries have assets. One of the assets they have is people. Okay? It's not to say that we can just do what we want. But we don't have to go on our bended knee and our cap in our hand.
Greece out. They're paying pittance for anything in Greece at the moment.
Yes, because the Greeks are run by people who used to work for Goldman Sachs, who believe that that's the way forward, and they will sell the Greeks down the drain. They are not working for Greece. They don't give a damn about the Greeks, because most of the people who are running Greece don't live in Greece. They never lived in Greece, they're just there because that's where their day job is. And as soon as they're out of that day job...
10 years ago, not in the last couple of years.
Sorry.
Can we get in from the back? It's really...
Yes, please.
If people just have one go and...
Yes.
All right, okay. Well, there's a lady waiting for her question there, and then we're coming to you, okay? Sorry?
Thank you. I think, I just want to say, I think you're being a bit hard on all politicians because the issue is bigger. The issue is bigger than politics. The issue is a far more substantive ideology. And so therefore people who are in political parties are very constrained by the dominant sort of like the whole conversation.
Yeah.
The fact that you can't move the conversation that far because the whole conversation sets up the world the way it is, like this great big construct that you've just described.
Yeah.
I mean, I did Marxism as well, so in the 70s. So for years I've been wondering why nobody couldn't see this was a whole hazard and it was bound to come crashing down. And I'm thinking, well, if I can see that, then I don't understand why everybody else can't see it either. Which leads to the question I was really going to ask, which is what is being taught in universities about economics? Because if all the people who go and like Stephanie Flanders who spouts on the news and all this stuff, but it's a busted flush and it always was.
Yes.
Then what is being taught? Have they stopped taught? Have they stopped
No, they carry on. I mean, those married to an ideology have never let a few inconvenient facts get in their way. That's just not going to happen because they don't pay any attention to facts. They love the ideology. It's beautiful. It's self-consistent, and as long as you accept its essential assumptions, it's like a Swiss watch. It's beautiful, and if your mind works that way, you'll be in love with it. So no, they're not. Am I being harsh on the politicians? Well, in a way, I am. I'm certainly very rude about them. But the way I look at it is, what is their job? Do they make something? Do they do widgets? Do they actually teach my children? Do they mend my broken leg? They do none of these things. Their job is to have that conversation. So it's not an excuse I'm willing to accept that it was really tough and difficult. No one will listen because that's their job. If you can't do it, get out.
Nobody else, if the whole thing is a house of cards, it's really difficult to shift that.
Yes, I found it very difficult this evening, but I'm still trying, and I'm a bloke from Scarborough. I think of these things in my attic, and it's cold in there. You know, it's so cold in there, I have to wear a scarf, a hat, Bob Cratchit gloves, and a red sleeping bag, because it's so cold in that room, and my children call me the little red worm. Yes, I know, it's, dignity is a thing of the past. They're sitting in very nice air-conditioned and heated place by the Thames, where cups of coffee were brought to them on demand, and they're telling me it's just too difficult to have a conversation. Oh, please! You know, if I know a lot of people who could do it if they can't. Yeah, of course I'm being simplistic. But look, some things are simple, okay? I don't want to, I agree. I am being simplistic. I'm being bombastic. Partly because I feel that there's a line of well-paid people pulling in that direction, and I'm pulling the other way. However, some things are simplistic. I know of a bank, and I know because I know the person in the bank who does this. This bank is a major bank, and they have two sets of books. There's the one that they show to their national regulator. And there is another set of books which contains the information of the accounts they have in the Cayman Islands. How do I know this? Because I know the man who looks at them both. This is illegal. It is fraud. It is worse than fraud. It is happening. Very highly paid people living in large houses are doing it. Day in, day out. They know they are doing it. So am I being unfair? Am I being a little bit harsh and not cutting them some slack? Am I hell? For reasons known only to them, some of these people talk to me. There are good bankers. There are people who believe that we need an economic system. I believe so. And they are mortally worried that what is being done is going to cause such a conflagration that they will be burnt to the ground too. There are good people in it. But there's just no getting away from the fact there are morally corrupt people and legally corrupt people, and they are being facilitated by the people that we elect and by the people that they appoint. And I don't think we should be afraid of saying that that is the case.
I'm not saying that.
No, I know you're
not.
not.
What I'm saying is, it's not as simple as just blaming the people who have to be in Parliament now, because what you're talking about is a whole world construct that has been built up over decades, and it is not as simple.
Fine.
People think that when you say things like this, or when I say things like that, which I do, that you're a nutter. And
Yes.
you're not listening, so the powers of persuasion take longer and it's more difficult.
I would buy that, and I would kiss them on both cheeks if I had ever heard a word of persuasion in the last 20 years. Maybe I was out that day. I didn't. I haven't seen them argue anything. I haven't heard them in Parliament having these discussions. I haven't heard them going out on the stump saying, this is wrong. And they knew it was wrong. The regulators knew it was wrong. People on the inside. A woman called Janet Tavokali. She's a major player in Chicago. She's brilliant. She's on the inside. She was writing about this, about what was going wrong as far back, I think, as 2003.
Is she the Republican woman? There's a woman in the Republican Party.
No, I don't think she is.
Okay.
No, she's in finance.
He says it's wrong. He says they should split the banks. The first thing Labour should do is split the banks between high street banks and investment banks. He said that very clear as the number one thing a Labour Party and Labour government should do.
Right, just 1 second.
Please.
Just remind you that Margaret Thatcher said that her greatest achievement was New Labour because they forced their opponents to change their mind. This lady, let's ask a question.
Like everyone else, I've got hundreds of things to say.
Please.
I think it's wonderful that everybody's got so much to say, and I'm very, very stimulated by what you said. But you know, I'm going to try and control myself. And in fact, I'm not going to ask questions, but I'm going to just tell you something which I think is infamous, which is I'm from Steady State Manchester, and we're really proud of just having produced this report in place of growth. And this is totally produced by citizens, people like you, and it's got things about what should happen to the local economy in it. And we may be right and we may be wrong, but I just really want to encourage people to read it, to come to our social next Wednesday, which is at the 8th day, because I think it's very much around it. Yeah, it's 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I've read it, it's really good.
Thank you. But you know, we love to work with this group and others. And I mean, if we have got time for a question, I think everyone's exhausted. I'd love to know what you think about steady state economics. But you know, I also think I'd like to hear what other people's questions are.
Okay, I can only give a very brief answer to steady state.
Can you give your email address to...
I've got, it's okay, we've been in contact, thank you.
She's in the road.
The idea of steady state goes to what this gentleman was saying about growth. I mean, all political parties have at one point or another, whenever they get in power, talk about 3% growth. This number just pops up. And it sounds so reasonable, doesn't it? 3%. That should be achievable. That's manageable, 3% growth. 3% growth is doubling every 17 years. Yeah. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in this country, not over a sustained period, and not through actually increasing the production of things that people want. The only way we've achieved more than 3% growth is by that growth being simply electronic figures in a bank saying how much your house was worth. Okay? Which was as fictional as we now found it to be. We can't. Capitalism and the refinements of it in things like fractional banking are the tools you need if you want accelerated growth. If there's a few of you sitting on a vast forest of untapped resources, capitalism is great if you want to really get going. Okay? The same way as the RBS grew at this pace until securitization and then grew like that. However, when you come to a point where there are lots of you sitting on quite a few resources and it's not very well distributed, that growth model is just not really that helpful. And it is the philosophical conundrum of our time. Can we, as a species almost, find the mental bravery to say that thing which we've never questioned for millennia is just not, it's not the answer to the problems that confront us. It's the answer to the problems of 100 years ago or 200 years ago. It's not now. Will we do it? Well, I hope so. Because I have children. We have to do it. Whether we will, I think whether we decide to do it or not, whether we face a more steady state and one where we don't achieve growth but we achieve a redistribution, I think it will be forced on us. I sincerely hope that we don't wait for it to be forced on us. I don't want that to happen. When people say, well, we should have less growth, I think sometimes they think that what you're in favour of is wearing hair shirts and bark sandals and living in a teepee. It's not what I want. I'm the first person in my family ever, on any branch, ever, as far as we've been able to trace the family, ever to go to university. And I had to tell them my children I might not be able to afford to let them go. I'll be goddamned if I'm going to let that happen.
Yes, sir.
I want to defend you. Not that you need defending, but I'm very much probably even slightly further on the, I would say, the emotional spectrum. I think the character of this room would be very different if we were in Athens or Madrid or Barcelona or these places. And I totally get our human need to feel that sense of things aren't as shit as they really are, and that we should be kind of subtle, and that we should, you know, maybe try and do this and try and do that. On the other hand, clearly, you know, we can't go and, you know, burn everything down. I'm not there either. But the argument, not only on the emotional level, I think that emotional argument is nowhere near where it needs to be yet. Just that sense of outrage as to what has been happening and what continues to happen. But it is happening slowly. It is happening. There was some senior ladies in the local supermarket, and they were quite agitated about the fact that, you know, Starbucks and Google, Amazon, they were taking the piss with all the tax dodging. So it's happening slowly. So I would say keep on pushing the emotional argument even further, but even on the intellectual argument, what I heard you say in the argument was we had a choice at the point at which the crisis happened, what to do, and the failure, part of that failure was because there was this misunderstanding as to who was being bailed out, who was being saved. And my view is Kyoto's already run off the edge of the cliff. And we're still, you know, the legs are cycling and he's waiting to fall down, you know, in the cartoon, waiting to fall down. Mervyn King is still coming out saying, the banks need more capital, the banks need more capital. Sure. No one is listening because where's that capital going to come from? Well, those who've got money aren't going to be stupid enough to recapitalise banks that they know are about to fall over. What they're saying is, we want more capital
of yours,
from us. Yeah. That's what they're saying. And obviously, you know, we're a bit touchy about that. Well, too right, we're a bit touchy about that. So I think equality. You could take a view, I'm not sure about this, but you could take the view that had we taken a different decision, had we gone the Iceland route, back at the time of the credit crisis, that might have done more for financial equality than probably any other single measure that's been proposed since I've been alive.
Sure.
That might, but the reason I'm not 100% sure is because of the unknown domino effects. That was the gun that was held to the politicians' heads, was the unknown side effect. If you're homeless, you don't give a toss. If you're really, really poor, you don't give a toss about those and those, because you can't get much worse. And so, I think from an equality standpoint, I think the central argument that I took from this is, when people talk about bailouts, who are being bailed out? It's used as a weapon at the moment in Spain, it's used as a weapon in Greece, it's used as a weapon in Ireland, and it's used to try and recover as much of that dishonest, faulty money as possible before it all catches up with them again. And what they're doing is very quickly they're transferring this paper money into physical assets. That's why they're buying up Greece, that's why they're buying up houses, that's why they're buying up all these things. Because when all that goes to shit, they've still got land, they've still got the buildings.
It's called a fire sale.
They have to rent.
It's called a fire.
Have you been reading The Slog? The Slog had a good article about all the assets that were being bought up all over the place.
So I'm in the let them fail camp.
And The Slog's a bit of a conservative, actually.
I'm in the let them fail camp as a default, and then if someone can give me a good argument as to why we would all, the 90, 95, 99% of us would be better off, genuinely, by not, let them make the case.
Yeah, well, I mean,
I agree.
I think the situation, regardless of the specifics of what I've said, whether there's holes that you could drive a bus through or not, and I'm sure there are. If there weren't, I'd be a genius and I wouldn't be here. You'd all be working for me. I'm sure there are holes in it. What bothers me is that what we're trying to do is fix a system which, if we fix it, we'll do it again. And bigger. I think it's an absolute disaster, the policies that are being followed. They're not fixing anything. They will make it worse. So it is really quite serious. It's not really the time for half measures, and I'd like to have a bare knuckle verbal fight, because I think it's a civilized alternative to a bare knuckle fight. Which is what will happen if they simply say, well, this great big machine was terrific and fine, but some idiot dropped a spanner in the works, it bent a few cogs, threw a few rods, we'll get some experts in there, you know, a technocratic government, they'll fix it all, we'll press the big green go button and everything will be hunky-dory. If they do that, it's a disaster. If they fix what's broken and turn it back to what was, it would be a disaster. Frankly, I don't think they can. Because it's not a linear world. It's the global economy isn't a big fat linear machine. It didn't break down, it mutated. And so what they're doing is taking all of our labour, all of our efforts, and pissing it away. We do need to invest in things which put people to work and produce things that they need, give them houses to live in and jobs to do that are making things that people want. But we're not doing that. The banks aren't doing that. We're not investing in that at all. We're pouring money into a machine which is terminally broken, and if they get some Frankenstein sewn together creature from the remnants, it will just cause an even bigger problem. I mean, I would say I am a revolutionary in the sense that I don't believe this is a matter of fixing something essentially good but which broke down. I think they're attempting to fix something which is a disaster, and we shouldn't let them. We do need revolutions. People always say revolutions, oh my God, people die in revolutions. Think of the guillotine, think of the 10,000 people who were slaughtered in the guillotine. Yeah, those people get their deaths lamented because they're from the literary class and people write lovely novels about how dreadful it was and the Scarlet Pimpernel was trying to save them. The hundreds of thousands of people who died in misery, in poverty, in a ditch, years before that, no one writes about them.
More people were hanged in England in 1790 than were guillotined in France.
In the 1600s, we started a revolution in this country. And that revolution threw up all of the ideas, all of the great ideas, which everyone here, and the Tories would say, oh, there's such wonderful ideas, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, universal suffrage. All of those ideas were written down by English men and women and published within 400 yards of St. Paul's in the space of 20 years. Every single one of them. They were then taken to America, they were taken to France. Those ideas were created in this country by the people of this country. We did it once, and we totally took down the system which until then had ruled us, and which the people in charge of that system said, my God, if you tear it down, imagine the dislocation that will happen. It'll be a disaster. We'll all die in a ditch. Everything that's good about Europe came from that revolution. And we have unfinished business.
The sixth first. Who's had the sixth first? Ben, yeah?
Hi David, I thought it was brilliant. I agree with everything you just said. Absolutely. But I just wanted to ask you a particular question about what you said last year.
Coming back to haunt me.
Give it any more thought or development anyway. Because last year when we were talking, I was talking specifically about what we do about it now.
Yeah.
Rather than sort of giving to before. And last year we had a slight disagreement on whether the best way forward was to find. You were talking about having a trans-European political party that could basically sort of operate at a level that's necessary to sort of overcome these problems. Whereas I was saying that what we need to do is have better links between the movements that already exist, because you've already got the grassroots mobilisation. And obviously in the context of on 14th of November, I think it was very modest, but it was the first time in the history of the trade union movement that there has been transnational industrial action on one day. And it was modest, it was across 4 countries, but if that can be built on, that is certainly a prospect of having that sort of a conference that we've never had before.
Yeah.
What's your view now on do you still?
My view is this, that the forces ranged against us are not organised on a national level. Okay? We still organise at the national level. I mean, when the revolution of the 1600s came along, the idea that we should organise nationally, that someone in Nottingham should make common cause with someone in Sussex was ridiculous. It's like asking, dare I say it, Lancastrians to work with Yorkshiremen. It's just not going to happen. It's unnatural. But we did, because we realised the forces ranged against us were organised nationally, and we organised ourselves nationally, and we won. We're still using that tool, which we developed hundreds of years ago, organising nationally, to fight organisations which just laugh at national borders. Like this gentleman said, if we bring in a law here, they'll just go, well, then hasta luego, babe. I'm going to Brazil. I know bankers who've left London and who said to me, we're leaving because Europe will never recover. We're going to Brazil because that's where the future is. And I said to this person, but you did this and you're leaving me and my children. Does that not bother you? No. Okay? We need to organise internationally. We do. I don't care how you do it. I don't care if you paint your arse blue and walk around Europe to get support. It doesn't bother me whether we make links between existing groups. That would seem to be a no-brainer. All I suggested when I said have an international party, it was a thought experiment to say, at the moment, we have national parties who have a little poor relation extrusion that we then send off to Europe. And they don't do anything there except argue the case for their national policies, and nothing good ever happens. I said, why not have a party which was based at the European level, which didn't seek to win elections in any given nation. You don't have to become king of the pile in Ireland or Britain to be powerful. The Irish have proved that. You can be you can be in charge of Ireland, you can win the Irish election, and you know what? You're in charge of nothing. So you can organise internationally, and I think we need to. But there are things we can do even within single countries. There are things that we can do to use the laws that already exist for odious debt, to write off debts, to cross-cancel debts. These things can be done. We're being prevented from even knowing they can be done by those poor people in Parliament who are having such a hard time talking about things which are difficult. They're on the statute books. They just need to get off their arse and go and look in the library. Page 400, paragraph 3. They're there. It's been done. I do think there are things we can do, but one of the things I think we need to withdraw our consent from the main parties and stop believing that they're going to save us. Does that mean we should just all stop voting for Labour? No, I think there's something to be gained by trying to win back those organisations of power which are there. I don't think we should put all our eggs in one basket. Should we just create new parties? That's a long shot. But I think we can no longer assume that the forms of organisation which were good 400 years ago are going to be good for fighting the powers of the 21st century. They're not. They had to dream up new forms of power for ordinary people. And they did it. And they were hairy-ass scruffians just like you lot. They did it. We can do it. We have to stop believing we can't. I don't know if that answers the question. Probably not. But it's as good as I can manage.
I always tell people that there's a Ministry of Defence report which was written in 2007, actually before Lehman Brothers went through the floor. Oh no, sorry, Bear Stearns went through the floor, which says that if inequality continues to grow as it does over the next few decades, the global middle class will have to align itself in order to defend its own interests. So if they could see how it was going, you know, so, and again, that's that international thing that you're talking about. This is the path that we're on, and we're still on it.
Well, lots of people in the UK would know.
Oh, no, that lady there is wanting to say something.
Absolutely, yeah.
But it's just an analysis of power. I really think that's what we've got to address.
Yes.
You know, and the classes aligning themselves, you know, when that's what we need to.
Yes, and all I've suggested is that one small part of that analysis is realising the nature of currency and the nature of debt. Because I think debt is the power of the 21st century. Who has it, who can issue it, and who is forced to owe whom. Thank you very much for coming.
Can we say this is brilliant rather than just...